Welcome to Chase Talks. My name's Chase, and today we are giving you another top 5 Pokemon episode. And in this video, we are going to be going over the first of 2 parts where we will be discussing the top 5 Victory Road Pokemon. In this first episode, we are going to be looking at the Victory Road Megas. There are a lot of Mega Pokemon. There really are a lot of Pokemon in general on the Victory Roads, or the last route of every single game. And we're going to be going over just the Megas this time. There's a lot of Megas on the routes. And in part 2, we'll be looking at the top 5 excluding the Megas. So the top 5 non-Mega evolved Pokemon. If a Pokemon appears on this list as a Mega, it can also appear on that list as a not Mega Pokemon. Now, how did I decide these Pokemon? We decided them based on 4 different criteria. The first was that they had to appear on the last route of any game before the Elite Four. So normally in most games it's titled Victory Road, and a couple of them it is not, like in the new Gen 7. We got the mountain, Mount Lanakitu. I might be totally pronouncing that wrong. I totally forgot what it is going off the top of my head on that one. That's not in my notes. I should have wrote it in my notes. I would remember it. But so they had to appear on that last route before the Elite Four in any game. The second thing that I looked at was that they had to be viable in all forms of competitive. So it was based on their total viability. So that's in singles, doubles, VGC, and in draft league. So I was looking at competitive as a whole, not just one specific form of competitive over another or anything like that. It was total viability, their total viability as a Pokemon. The third thing I looked at was, of course, it was Gen 7 competitive viability. So I did not take the performance in other generations into account. So for example, on the Pokemon list, not the Mega list, Gengar no longer has Levitate. It did up until Gen 7 have Levitate. Gen 7, Levitate was removed. So I will be looking at Curse Body Gengar on that list. I will not be considering Levitate Gengar because it is not viable in Gen 7 competitive, and unless they change it in Gen 8, it won't be viable in Gen 8 either. Though, of course, Gen 8 is not considered because Gen 8 is not released yet since this was made during Gen 7. We might see an update in Gen 8, you never know. And the last condition was that Pokemon could only appear once from each species. Now this does not matter for the Mega Evolution, but it will matter for the basic Pokemon, the second part of this list, because Pokemon like Crobat and Golbat, that of course both appear on Victory Roads, are looked at together, though they each have their own competitive viability separate, and they're both good for different reasons. They are considered on the same slot. They cannot hold 2 slots on that top 5 list if they hold a slot on that top 5 list at all. And with no further ado, I am going to hop right into our top 5. And holding down the number 5 spot on this list is none other than Mega Aggron. And talk about a Pokemon that's viability is solely determined by its Mega Evolution, and the number 1 spot on that list would be Mega Aggron. Mega Aggron just jumps to a whole new level compared to its non-Mega counterpart. First, it loses its rock typing, making it a mono steel type, which allows it to lose its fighting type. It's 4 times weakness to fighting type, and it's 4 times weakness to ground. And then when you compare that with its filter ability, which reduces super effective hits or super effective damage taken by 1/4, and you add in its 230 defense stat, this thing is just so good. While it lacks a little bit in HP and in special defense, only having 70 HP and 80 special defense, those are still by no means bad stats. They are really okay to mess stats, but for a tank of this size, they are just great stats when combined with its filter ability. This Pokemon is also no slouch from an offensive standpoint, boasting a 140 physical attack stat. You can run 0 investment on this thing, and this thing will do so much damage, and it gets great coverage a match. It has access to the elemental punches, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, Fire Punch. It also gets access to Heavy Slam, which does more damage based on the Pokemon's weight. It also has Iron Head if you don't want to run that, and it gives you the flinch chance. And it has Earthquake, giving you the ability to combat other steel types carrying around that ground weakness on you. It also has access to Stealth Rocks, and the ability to place hazards can be so viable to the win condition of a team. It is crazy, especially when you're looking at the Draft League format or in singles. Of course, that does not hold as much viability in doubles, but this thing is just such a monster, and it does have the ability to be viable in doubles. This thing is just a tanky tank that is so hard to kill. It'll live for days. I have used this Pokemon before in a draft league. I've used it before in singles. I love this Pokemon. This Pokemon needs more loving. It gets overshadowed a little bit. I know that, but I know like A-Drive won a championship with this. This Pokemon is just so good, and it definitely holds solid rock down. I guess I should say solid steels. So use the solid steel to hold down this number 5 slot. And our number 4 spot is none other than Mega Gyarados. Now, Mega Gyarados is a Pokemon that is amazing in both Mega and non-Mega form. One thing that is really awesome about the Mega Evolution standpoint of Gyarados is that the normal Gyarados does get Intimidate, so you have the ability to bring in Gyarados, drop your opponent to -1, and then Mega Evolve, gaining Mold Breaker as your ability rather than having the Intimidate, and now get set up a Dragon Dance. It has some good setup options in there in order to kind of get that free setup where they have to swap, or they could just have a power down attack that you know you can live. So it does give you some good setup options there and give you some good sweep up potential. Also, the addition of Mold Breaker allows you to hit Pokemon through their abilities. So, for example, things like Mimikyu, you hit through its disguise. Sturdy Pokemon, you can just OHKO them, Sturdy doesn't activate, and Levitate Pokemon can be hit by Earthquake, which this Pokemon does have access to, and it backs that up with its 155 attack stat. This thing's such a monster, and not only does it get a monster attack stat, increasing its attack stat by 30 compared to its non-Mega Evolved form, but it also gets a 30 boost in its special defense, and it gets a big boost, an even bigger boost in physical defense, because its physical defense goes from 79 all the way up to 109. This thing just becomes a bulky beast and keeps its 81 speed stat, which is not a bad speed tier. It's not a great speed tier, excuse me. Wow, it's not like an over 100 speed tier, but it is still a really good speed tier. It does also add the Dark type, which allows it to lose its Flying type, which does give you some cool viability options, because it does lose its 4 times weakness to Electric and gain a Psychic immunity. Of course, it does gain a Bug weakness, a Fairy weakness, a Fighting weakness, and a Grass weakness, and it loses its Ground immunity. So you do have a trade-off there, but it can be seen as positive depending on, of course, the format of your team. This Pokemon also has good access to overall coverage. It does get access to Crunch, which has Stab with its newly added Dark type, Waterfall, which is a strong Water type stab move with the ability to flinch. It also gets access to Earthquake, which is an amazing move with Mold Breaker. The ability to hit things that are levitating is just so valuable. And Ice Fang, which is also a really good coverage move. It's great for how many 4 times weaknesses to Ice are running around in the format, like Garchomp, Landorus T, Salamence, Mega Salamence at all tiers. No matter what competitive format you're in, I guarantee that at some point you're going to face a 4 times weakness to Ice. And just with the amount of dragons running around too, that is just so valuable coverage that Mega Gyarados has. And it's one of the reasons too why, with all the other factors I said before, that Mega Gyarados easily breaks the mold and holds down this 4th place slot. Our number 3 Pokemon is none other than Mega Medicham. Now, just looking at this Pokemon's ability, pure power speaks for itself. It doubles the Pokemon's attack stat, and with a base 100 attack stat after Mega Evolving, this Pokemon is so strong. Doubling that base stat when it's already that high is just crazy, and it also gains a base speed of 100, making it a relatively fast Pokemon. It outspeeds a lot of things in the format. It is just so good. And then when you combine that with the amazing coverage it has, first let's talk priority. It gets access to Fake Out and Bullet Punch. It also gets access to the elemental punches, so your Ice Punch, your Fire Punch. It gets 2 good forms of Psychic Stab, Zen Headbutt, which gives it the chance to flinch, and Psycho Cut, which is a high crit move, so it has a higher chance of critically hitting. It also gets access to Rock Slide, Poison Jab, and High Jump Kick to give it extra fighting stab. This Pokemon is just an offensive monster. It's a full offensive monster of the likes of Lopunny. This thing is just amazing, and there is no other Pokemon that is better suited to High Jump Kick its way into this 3rd slot. The 2nd slot on this list is none other than the spooky ghost itself, the spooky, scary, ghosty Mega Gengar. There's a reason that this Pokemon is Ubers, and one of those reasons is its Shadow Tag ability, which allows Pokemon the inability to swap out, of course, unless it has something like a Shed Shell or it has U-Turn or Volt Switch, something that can grab momentum. So it does prevent swapping, except in those cases. And when you combine it with a 170 special attack and a 130 speed, if this thing catches anything but your tank, and a lot of tanks are going to die anyway, this thing is just going to rip it to shreds. It also gets Perish Songing options, so you can Shadow Tag, trap in enemy Pokemon and Perish Song them, or you can disable them, or you can Will-O-Wisp them, or you can taunt them. And the craziest thing about Shadow Tag is when you're in doubles, it locks in both of the enemy's Pokemon. So if you want to lock in both Pokemon, click Perish Song, and now have them both be dead in 3 turns. You can totally do that, which is crazy. It also gets such good coverage beyond the utility options that I just said. It gets options to Shadow Ball, which is amazing Ghost Stab, Sludge Wave, and Sludge Bomb, which are each good poison type moves in their own right. Sludge Bomb having the ability to 30% paralysis is kind of like the Scald of poison types. I don't know why I said paralysis. I meant poison. It gives a 30% chance to poison, not paralysis. Make that clear. It's not paralysis. Sludge Wave, just a little bit higher base power move, still very strong, not as good in doubles because it does have a higher chance to poison your own ally. It also gets access to Destiny Bond. If you want to kill this thing, it'll just kill you right back if you actually get a point where you can outspeed it. Focus Blast, Thunderbolt, Dazzling Gleam, Energy Ball. It can even run Knockout. This thing's Knock Off. This thing's coverage is out of this world, and that's where the out and knockout came from. This thing will knock out all of your Pokemon, and that is why it spookily phases its way into the second slot of this list, and there's no Pokemon better suited to hold this second slot than the uber destroying monster that is Mega Gengar. It's banned in every draft league for a reason, and this is why it's too good. I don't know why this thing's allowed in VGC 18. It has given me nightmares every single time I faced against it. I should be carrying Dream Eater because it could be gaining a lot of HP from my nightmares. Before we hop into our final slot on this list, our number 1 slot, I am going to just list off a few honorable mentions. The first of these honorable mentions is Mega Sableye. Now, Sableye, before it Mega Evolves, does have access to the Prankster ability, which is just amazing. Makes status come first. After it Mega Evolves, that ability becomes Magic Bounce, making this so high defensive monster. 125 defense, 115 special defense, and you can't not status it, and you can't set up hazards. That thing is crazy. The next of our honorable mentions is Mega Alakazam, and I think I've been swept enough times in both my Chase's Better OU series and my Let's Learn VGC series to have Mega Alakazam speak for itself. This Pokemon is an offensive monster, especially given something like Psychic Terrain when paired with Tapu Lele. It can just break down all the walls. And speaking of wall breakers, our next honorable mention is Mega Garchomp. Now, the fact that it does lose its speed on that Gen 6 to 7 change on its first turn from Mega Evolving does hurt this Mega Garchomp this gen, but it definitely barely got edged out by Aggron to holding the 5th spot on this list. It is just such an offensive monster. Its attack stat so high, its special attack so high. This thing does so much damage, and it has great coverage. Normal Garchomp still does just barely outclass it, but this thing does so much damage, and it breaks so many walls. And with our honorable mentions out of the way, we will move to our number 1 slot on this list, and that Pokemon is none other than Mega Mawile, the Steel Fairy Monster. The Steel Fairy Monster before Magearna was even conceived, before Magearna was in the womb. Mega Mawile was taking souls. This thing's immune to Dragon, this thing's immune to Poison, and it only has 2 weaknesses, which are Ground and Fire. Then when you pair that with a 125 defense stance and a 95 special defense stat, this thing does so much damage, and before it Mega Evolves, it gets access to Intimidate. So you can bring this thing in, you can put your opponent at -1, then you can Mega Evolve. Your ability becomes Huge Power, which, like Pure Power on Mega Medicham, doubles your attack, which is already 105, so now that 105 attack is getting doubled. and allows you to easily set up a Swords Dance. This thing gets up a Swords Dance. There is no switching. It only has a 50 base speed, which is probably the weakest part of this Pokemon, but in doubles and in VGC 18, this thing is such a powerful Trick Room sweeper with that 50 speed. It also gets access to Sucker Punch for priority, Knock Off to remove enemy Pokemon's items, Play Rough for Fairy Stab, which Tapu Bulu doesn't even get access to, Elemental Punches, Iron Head, Rock Slide. This thing gets so much coverage and it does so much damage. The fact that this thing is not Noobers blows my mind that this thing just sits in OU. I get that EQ, that ground coverage is like normal coverage and fire types are everywhere, but it doesn't matter. If you can set up a Swords Dance with this Pokemon, there's nothing that can live a hit from it. This thing is just so good and its coverage so well. And that's why it holds the #1 spot on this list. And, of course, as always, this is just my opinion. Did you agree with my opinion? Let me know in the comment section down below. Did you agree with our #1 slot, our #2 slot, our #3 slot, our #4 slot, and our #5 slot? Or did you think that another Pokemon should edge out a Pokemon on this list? Do you think that Garchomp or Sableye or Alakazam was more deserving of that #5 slot than Mega Aggron, or maybe that #4 slot than Mega Gyarados? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to read your guys' top 5 Megas on Victory Roads. Of course, remember, this is Victory Road Pokemon. This is not top 5 Megas in general. Otherwise, that list would, of course, be different. But thanks for watching. Remember to rate the video, comment the video, and subscribe so you never miss another episode of Chase Talks. Until next time, this is Chase, signing off.